Hey, good day, everyone. Welcome. I noticed I forgot again to change my my name on there like I'm supposed to before everyone from Anthony. So I'll do that so all you people know exactly who you're listening to for the 400th time, right? like that's an issue. I'm just going to kick things off with a couple quick comments here. Today, we're going to put you into the capable hands of Amanda, my associate here, who's going to talk about 5500s. Welcome, Amanda. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Amanda brings a different perspective to talking about 5500s than I could because she's lived in the trenches. Amanda, you actually did 5500 processing for a while in a previous job. So you were doing the filings and collecting the data, weren't you?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Kind of in the trenches. I get to just read the stuff and pretend I know how to do it because we know the rules, but you actually had to do it. So really the real reason we're talking about 5500s today is, of course, we got the deadline coming up for calendar year plans is screaming up on us. Can you believe it's almost June, people? Can you believe it's only 2 weeks away from June? I can't, that just blows me away. So the deadline's coming up, and the real dirty little secret is Amanda and Reagan and Sarah and I sat down and said, God, can we please talk about something other than the Cobra subsidy? Anything. I'll talk about how bad the Minnesota United are doing in soccer. I just do not want to talk about the Cobra subsidy again. And so we thought the timing with the 5500 deadline coming up was a good thing to talk about. I know 5500s, you've been dealing with it for years. Many of you do them internally. Some of your firms do it. Some of your firms farm things out. Just as a quick FYI, if you want help from us, we actually partner with a firm. We don't do the processing internally here. We partner with a firm that we do a really good job, does a really good job, and we'd be happy to introduce you, but we don't do the actual transaction side of things.
We had, if any of you remember, we had Iris on in September to kind of talk about the process and the price and everything. So
that was last September already.
Mm-hmm.
That's like over 6 months. Wow, that feels like it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
Time is so weird this year. I mean, I still feel like it's 2020 sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, because we got only friends and neighbors on this call, I'm gonna share my 2020 moment because a lot of you have heard me already give Amanda a hard time about her window background moment. I'm not gonna bring that up again, but I had one because some of you have seen this. We have a partnership with WEX Health. WEX is the technology company that does the technology for a lot of TPAs, right? And we have a partnership with WEX Health to help some of their clients out with compliance. And some of you have already sent me notes. You saw that WEX Health publishes a video podcast that a lot of you watch, Benefits Buzz. And last week on Benefits Buzz, they interviewed me on questions around the Cobra subsidy. Well, my 2020 moment was they set up the interview for Monday morning at 9 o'clock my time, and I thought it was just an audio podcast. So I dialed into the call thinking I was just going to sit there and answer questions on audio, sitting in my gym shorts and the t-shirt I had slept in and not shaved and slippers. And WEX said, Bob, didn't you know this is a video podcast? Can you turn your video on? And I said, no, I can't. Give me 5 minutes. So I ran in the other room, put a dress shirt on, put a sport coat on, sat down. And if any of you see that podcast, this is so stereotyped, and it's the running joke that we've heard 1,000 times, but it's real. Watch that podcast. I am sitting in gym shorts and slippers doing that podcast with a suit coat and a shirt on because we only have about half an hour.
How do we know that's not what you're doing all the time?
I could prove that because I have pants on now. So I think you're calling me out on that one. All right, so Amanda, I'm going to turn it over to you. The PowerPoint is, the slides as always are in the handout section. You want to download them, but I'm going to remind everybody on our resource site that we hope you're all registered for. We keep copies of all these recordings are on the resource site and the handouts that go along with them. We say it over and over, but you're free to take the PowerPoints from us, take the content off them, put them in your PowerPoints and use them for your presentation. That's part of what we want to provide you. So make sure you go to the resource site and get some of that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Amanda, and I'm sure I'll have some questions for you. And again, remember everybody, I've got the question box here up on my other screen. So if you want questions and comments, I'll be watching that as Amanda's talking to throw in. And again, not just questions. We love it when you give comments that we can share with everybody in here too. So I'll be watching that while Amanda's talking, and let's remind ourselves why 5500s are important and how we should be thinking about them for our clients. Amanda, the floor is all yours.
So I thought that we would just do kind of a Q&A type session today instead of going over the basics and who has to file and everything like that. So these are really just the most common questions, and they're a little bit complicated. They're a little bit in the weeds, but we think you guys can handle it. So the ones that we've been getting lately here. So question number 1. Which EIN should be used? So I guess just to back up just a second, right? You have to, on the main form of the 5500, you're supposed to put an EIN in the main part of the form 5500 here. And sometimes this question comes up, right, if you're as a part of a controlled group or something like that. So the answer to the question is it's the EIN for the plan sponsor. So then that begs the question, who exactly is the plan sponsor? So if you're just a single employer plan, it's just going to be the employer.
Right.
So you're going to use their EIN, you're going to put it in there. If you're in a controlled group, and I'm saying controlled group here, assuming that it's a controlled group and, you know, assuming that it's not a MEWA, but I suppose the same would hold true for a MEWA, right? You're just going to pick one of them essentially to be the plan sponsor. There is no requirement that it be a specific one. It doesn't have to, you know, even if it's a parent subsidiary controlled group, it doesn't have to be the parent. And we get a lot of questions on this too. What if you have a controlled group where you have a holding company and it's kind of above the rest of your EINs, but it doesn't have any employees? That's okay too. It's just make sure that whatever EIN you pick matches this plan sponsor that you pick. And so that should be reflected in your plan documents, in your SPDs, a matching EIN to the plan sponsor.
I bet you're going to hear this more than once from me, aren't we, Amanda? Because I mean, it's not just the 5500 rules, right? There's a bigger issue here. The company has to decide who's the plan sponsor.
Yep.
Or the group of companies, and that drives a number of things. It drives, like you said, the plan documentation is supposed to list that, and so these things should speak together. It's not just a 5500 question. Good point.
And you know, the plan sponsor is going to be the one with the actual fiduciary responsibilities in regards to the plan. So I mean, it does matter. That said, you know, if like I said, it's a holding company, if we have people involved in multiple entities, the person who's actually going to be responsible, it's not as big of a deal. The other thing I want to point out, because a lot of people have said to me, well, you know, we're a part of our controlled group, but we have employees that don't even really know that we're a part of a controlled group, but we're all under one plan. So if I list this one company as the plan sponsor, do I have to call our plan? Like, does the plan name have to be reflective of that plan sponsor? And the answer to that is no. You can name your ERISA plan however you choose to. So if you want it to be something more all-encompassing or something, you know, just more generic or something like that, so that your employees don't get confused, that's totally fine too.
So can I ask you about that one again? Because that one's a very practical thing, right? You got a lot of these companies that we work with have a real complicated structure, and the holding company might be some bizarrely named Winkin, Blinkin, and Nod Holding, and owns 7 different companies, but all their products are sold under Smith Tools.
Yep.
And so even if I name the EIN from Winkin and Blinkin and Nod Holding as the plan sponsor with 5500, I can name the plan Smith Tools Benefit Plan, right?
Right.
That's fine.
Exactly. Okay. We have a question here about listing all the EINs in the plan document and the SPD. So you should do that. But there's a difference between listing them and saying that this is a plan and these are the participating EINs, and saying this EIN is the plan sponsor, because you are going to have to pick one for purposes of 5500 reporting and putting it in. But that's a different, you should still list all the EINs that are covered just for eligibility purposes.
Got it. Yep. So all those EINs participate in the plan document, but you don't have to put all those numbers in the 5500. Okay.
Yep. Okay. So question 2.
I was going to ask you that question, Amanda. I was watching the questions. I wasn't shirking my duties, so you can keep.
I just thought it was a good time to bring it up.
It was very
So question 2, the question is that the employer is a part of a controlled group. So we're kind of sticking with that theme here. The controlled group has over 100 employees, so across all EINs. So the question is then, does that mean that each employer in the controlled group has to file a Form 5500? And so the answer to this is maybe. So I think before we kind of get into this, I want to clarify, because I think this gets mistaken and confused kind of with the applicable large employer type considerations. So for Form 5500 purposes, we're really talking about the plans. And I know that that's crazy, because it's like the plan really kind of is the employer. It's this legal fiction that we all kind of operate under in this world. The plan is a separate entity from the employer, and for 5500 purposes, the question really is how many participants are on the plan. It doesn't have anything to do with how many employees are employed by a single entity. That said, a lot of times when you are determining whether or not a plan has 100 employees, you're looking at that basic life count, because you're assumed is for employers where every single employee is eligible for your basic life, that's a pretty good indication, because that's going to be all of the unique employees, right? Like you might have some overlap. So maybe someone's on life and medical or life and dental. So instead of like going through each of the other subcategories and figuring out how many there are, you look at basic life, and that's how you determine. That is not to say that it is based on employees. So for a controlled group, really the question is, how many plans are there? So if there's only one plan and that covers the entire controlled group, and you have basic life that covers every employee, then the answer to this would be yes, a 5500 has to be filed for every EIN in the controlled group, but it's still just one. It's just one 5500. Yep. So we're not looking, and you don't have to have a separate 5500 for each EIN. In fact, that's not correct if there's still only one plan. So it's just, you really have to kind of divorce the two in your mind. An employer and employee counts versus the plan, how many plans there are, and how many participants of the plan.
And you could have a mix, right? Couldn't you, Amanda? Couldn't you could have a plan, you could have a control group with 10 entities. Yep. And for whatever reason, they decide to have one plan, 9 entities participate in one plan. Mm-hmm. And one of the entities sponsors their own ERISA plan, their own benefits completely separately, right? Yep. Then we would just be looking at the total numbers of those 2 plans, even though there's a mixture of their companies in there.
Yep. We have a question here. Is it an average of 100 employees for 2020?
When do you count the 100?
Yep. So it's at the beginning. It's at the as of the first day of the plan year, and it's not an average. It's exactly how many participants you have as of the first day of the plan year. Okay, so question 2. So again, the answer is maybe how many plans are there and how many participants are there as of the first day of the plan year in each plan, right? So under Bob's example, you've got 9 of the EINs in the controlled group under one plan. So how many individual participants are there as of the first day of that plan year, and then how many individual participants are in the other one for that one EIN. And just to clarify too what participants means, because this is again kind of a term of art, participants are covered employees or former employees. So we're not talking about beneficiaries, so this doesn't count spouses or dependents, but it does count COBRA participants, retirees, things like that. So active employees or former employees, essentially.
And I don't think it's a fair question. What if I'm one of those people that covers a board member or something? That it's not technically an employee, but are they treated as an employee for count purposes?
Yep, that's a participant. Yeah. I guess maybe another way to say it is like policy owner. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Subscriber, a policy owner, something like that.
Yep.
So yeah, in other words, in summary, a lot of times we'll get a question into the inbox. This is how many employees that this employer has. This is how many employees this employer has. Do both of them have to file a Form 5500? They're in the same controlled group. That's just not enough information. So, all right. We got another question.
Great question, Michael. I get the answer to this one. Is in my example, nine companies on one plan, and they got 1,000 employees, and one little company with 25 people have their own plan. they don't have to file a 5,500. That plan only has 25 participants. So it really is
Yep.
how you structured the plans. Amanda, I don't want to steal your thunder, but are you also going to address how we structure plans? Because sometimes we combine. Okay, yeah, good, because that's going to matter too.
I think that might be the next question, actually. We'll see.
I should have read ahead of the
It was
questions.
a couple days ago that I put this. Okay, yep, here it is. So the question is, are benefits with under 100 participants as of the first day of the plan year required to
Why
be
do you always say
reported
maybe?
on Form 55?
Come on. Our brokers don't want us compliance people always saying maybe. They want yes or no answers.
Because I went to law school, I'm sorry.
And that's the right answer is the problem.
Yeah, that's okay. So yeah, again, maybe. So the answer to this question really depends on, like Bob is mentioning there. Again, anytime you're going to ask me, does this need to be filed? The question I'm going to ask you is how many plans are there, right? So let's assume, for example, that you had a plan that included 4 different types of benefits, medical, or let's just say 2 to make it easy, medical and dental. On medical, you have 100 participants. On dental, you have 2 participants, but they're part of the same plan. Both of them have to be filed. If they're a part of separate plans, then only medical has to be filed. And now I'm going to switch it up and make it just a little bit different too. Okay, let's say that you have one plan, you have 2 benefits, and they each have, actually, this is one of my points here, they each have 50 individual, like 50 unique participants, right? In that case, you're going to have to file both of them, even though neither one of them are over 100 on their own. So you could imagine the situation, let's say, where you have wrapped under the same ERISA plan, you have 2 separate locations, and they're only, the participants of each location are only eligible for one of the benefits. So maybe you have 2 different medical options, 2 HMOs, but they're a part of the same ERISA plan. In that case, even though neither one of those HMOs are over 100 on their own, they meet 100 and they're both of this part of the same ERISA plan. So then in that case too, both would have to be filed under your Form 5500. So again, I think we're all used to looking at number of employees, how many people are on this specific policy. We're looking at the plan. We're looking at the ERISA plan, which feels a little bit like a fake thing, but that's what matters for the Form 5500.
Well, I think it's become pretty standard operating procedure. Most of you are writing your plans as a wrap plan most of the time. You're going in and you're doing one plan document to cover your medical, dental, vision, life under one plan. That's most commonly what you're doing, and that's what you're pointing out here. That's going to matter. An example I like to use, Amanda, is you got 75 people on your medical and dental, and to your point, basic life has 125. If you write that all under one plan, you're filing a 5500 to cover all those benefits, right? Because you got more than 100. You could, though, write your life plan as a separate plan and keep everything else under your wrap plan, and you don't have to file. I don't know, maybe I could get some comments from the crowd. Filing a 5500 is not actually all that hard, so I don't know that it's worth rejiggering your plans just to get to do that.
Especially if you're already filing one, it's kind of nice to have everything all under one document. I mean, we had a comment here from Kari. Thank you for pointing this out. Not everything, but most of what we've been talking about here is assuming that you have an unfunded plan.
And explain that.
Yeah, and when we say unfunded, I'm not talking about insurance or self-insurance or whether or not you have stop loss, none of that. I'm talking about basically whether or not you have a trust. So if you have a funded plan, like through a trust, or you're not paying through your Aviva, something like that, you're not paying through your general assets, and you're considered a funded plan, then there are cases where you still have to file a Form 5500, even if you're under 100 participants as of the first day of the plan year.
But 99.9% of you, even if you got self-insured plans, they're not funded. There's really no reason anymore for most employers to fund their health plans through a trust. There's no tax advantages, so it's just most of you are not dealing with, unless you're dealing with a union plan or a Aviva or something. So most of you don't have to worry about that.
Okay, all right. Move on to the next, I think I covered. Yep, okay. So question 4, are self-insured plans required to be reported? So at first when we got this question, I was kind of confused about why we were getting this question because I had never actually seen that floating around out there that was a question, but then I kind of figured out what was going on with this. So the answer is yes. You know, if it's a benefit of the type that's covered by ERISA, which self-funded medical plans definitely are, and it has 100 participants as of the first day of the plan year, you definitely have to file it under Form 5500. The question is though, whether, I think, or the mistake maybe is that when you're looking at it, and especially if it's just the self-insured medical plan and that's it, you're not going to have the Schedule A. So it just looks really bare and weird. And I think maybe that, especially, I remember when I started filing Form 5500s and I didn't really understand what was happening, and I'm looking at it, and to me, I've got 5 Schedule A's, and they're for life, dental, vision, whatever. It looks like they don't even have a medical plan,
Right?
Because you don't have a Schedule A for it, right? So you might look at that and say, oh, they didn't even file for that medical plan, but they did. It's just that it looks a little bit different. So self-insured plans are not going to include a Schedule A. So this could be, you know, your major medical plan, your HRA, your FSA. These are all self-insured medical plans that have to be filed on a Form 5500 if they have 100 or more participants, right? Or they're wrapped with a plan that does. And the way that you're going to report for these is that you're going to check box 4 in lines 9A and 9B, indicating that it's funded and paid through the employer's general assets. And then you're also, instead of insurance, and then you're also going to enter code 4A on line 8B, which indicates the benefit type and that it's health. And so again, this can be confusing too, especially in the case of someone who has, maybe you have multiple health type benefits. So you've already got line 4A on there for something different. So sometimes it can be hard to tell just by looking at your Form 5500 what exactly you're reporting for. You don't put the code in there twice if you have an FSA and an HRA and a major medical plan, but that's how you report for it.
All right, I'm going to try to stump you though. I offer a fully insured group health plan and a self-insured group health plan. So I get a Schedule A from my carrier for my fully insured one, and I don't for my self-insured.
Mm-hmm.
I still check box 4, 9A and B because I do have a plan in there that's general assets.
Yep. And then you're also going to, and then we have a question here, what about dental and vision self-funded plans? So in that case, you're still going to check 9B for general assets, but then instead of 4A, there's specific codes for dental and vision. So you would make sure that you have the dental and vision codes there on line 8B.
Jim's asking, is there ever a time we include the dependents in the participant count? I suppose only if they're a COBRA continuee, right? If a dependent child ages out and takes COBRA, they become counted as their own subscriber, but never a dependent of an active employee. They never get counted, do they? Okay.
No. To clarify, here's another thing that I think gets mistaken a lot. When on the Form 5500 body itself, we're talking about participants. On the Schedule A's, we're talking about participants and beneficiaries. I always say belly buttons. So on the Schedule A, it's belly buttons, right? On the Form 5500 itself, it's the participants.
Why did they use participant when they wrote the 5500 rules? Come on, that wasn't fair.
Okay, I think we have one more question here. Okay, are Schedule A's required for stop loss contracts? So we get this one all the time. The answer to this one is generally no, and I know that can be kind of shocking to people because I have seen that this is actually kind of a common thing to include in filings, even though it's not required. There are instances where it is, and that is essentially when, so there's a few different times when this can come into play. If the policy is issued to the plan rather than to the employer, which that again, is almost never the case, because at the end of the day, right, it's the employer covering the costs. And then if it goes above a certain point, the employer that's going to have that coverage from the stop loss, not the plan. If payments under the policy are made to the plan, again, that's a situation where you would have to report on it. Or if the policy premiums for that stop loss are not paid exclusively out of employer general assets. So in other words, through a trust or participant contribution. So Kari, a funded plan. That's what that last bullet point is. So yeah, and another thing that I get a question about here a lot too is, you know, we've been including the stop loss in our 5,500 filings. Do I need to continue to do that now that we figured out that we don't have to? No, I mean, there's no, even if the Department of Labor would come back and say like, we see that this one's no longer there, you would just be like, well, because we figured out that it doesn't have to be there, and that would be the end of it. And yeah, so no, you don't have to continue to report your stop loss on your Form 5500s, even if you've already been doing that, if you don't have to. Okay, so good. Now we're getting some.
Allison has a good question. So you mentioned that the Schedule A's typically have all participants and dependents, or employees and dependents.
Yep.
Is that how they come default, or you have to request that from the carrier? Or what, you know, how's that?
Yeah, they normally come like that. A lot of times you can see two different numbers on there. If it's not clear to you, I would certainly clarify. But yeah, most of the time, from what I remember, a lot of times you'll have two different numbers, and it's obviously a bigger number. That's the other thing. I feel like I could have an entire class on just what these Schedule A's look like when you get them from the carriers. When I started filing, that was one of the hardest things, just to kind of comb through these Schedule A's to find the right information. Yeah, depends on the carrier is exactly right. Yeah.
So both Candace and Jim brought up my favorite topic. I know you and Iris talked about this last time, but I wanna bring this one up. Guys, you almost never have to file a Schedule C for your health and welfare plans, and you never have to file your fees for health and welfare plans. A Schedule C is only required for your health and welfare plans. We're going to go back to it again. If your plan is funded, if it's funded through a trust. Even if you're self-insured, most of your clients don't. They pay the plan out of their general assets. You don't need a Schedule C. You shouldn't use a Schedule C. You're wasting your time. You're giving them too much information. If you put all the Schedule C stuff in there and send it in, the Department of Labor is not going to get back to you and say, hey, you shouldn't have sent that to us. They're just going to file it. Okay, so no, we shouldn't be in the 5,500 reporting our compensation and our fees that would be required under some pension rules, where you've got to file more. And again, I'm going to let you, I see some more questions coming in here, but, and I know you addressed this last time, but you know, there is a proposal out there from years ago to expand the 5,500 filing, but that could change everything dramatically, but that's not what we're dealing with today. So no Schedule C's unless your health and welfare plan is funded, and you don't have to put all that information in there.
Yeah. Right. I think we got to the.
Okay, is that all your questions? Cool. Yeah. So, and timing's perfect. We got one more minute here. We'll watch and let you send in a couple questions while we close things out. Thank you, Amanda. Those were the real practical things that you're dealing with 5,500s. Time is coming up. We didn't put it out there, but I'll let you check that question while I'm saying this. Yep. Always remember to be really careful with short plan years too. That's a common mistake we see when you guys change plan years. And you do a short plan year, yes. You've got a filing deadline after the end of the short plan year, and so you're gonna have to file an extra 5,500. And so that's really commonly missed. They go back to their regular annual 5,500 filing and they miss filing that one for that short plan year. So please do that so you don't end up having to go into the delinquent filer program just over that silly little short plan year.
I have a question just quickly before we sign off here about multiple benefits basically being reported by a carrier under the same policy number. So on the Schedule A, on the Form 5,500, there are boxes that you can check to indicate what the policy number is covering, and you can check more than one. That's not super uncommon. It's kind of weird because it's like, what's the point of putting them under the same one? But you can check more than one. Specifically for the question about self-funded and fully insured, it would just be medical, I think it is. And yeah, so it probably wouldn't indicate separate lines, but make sure if there are more than one line on there, this is where it's kind of difficult. The participant counts, you don't want to just necessarily add them together because you could have duplicates or the beneficiary and the belly button count, you could have duplicates. So a lot of times you're going to pick the bigger one. Ideally, this is crazy, you'd want to get a list of both of them. And if they're the same, right, they only count for one, but if there's one here and one not here, then you add them up together. But that's a lot of work.
All right, Amanda, thank you very much. I'm going to make a bold prediction here for the first 3 weeks after the COBRA subsidy is passed. I got on these Wednesday things saying maybe we'll get some guidance this Friday, and 3 weeks in a row we got nothing. And now we're sitting here almost to the deadline and we still got no guidance. So I'm going to stand here in front of all of you and say we're not going to get any guidance this week. And hey, maybe I'll be wrong again and we'll get something this Friday. So we'll see next week. If we do, we'll talk to you about it. But thanks for joining us, everybody. If we didn't get to all your questions, you're all clients, you know where to find us. Send it to questions@benefitcomply.com or call us. And everybody have a great Wednesday. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.